So, Dr. Brian Lenzkes, thank you so much for joining us today on this really, really important module that we're building for the Nutrition Network, which is about obesity. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much. All the way from San Diego, California, joining you. And it's always awesome. I'm always proud to be a part of anything Professor Noakes is doing in the Nutrition Network. So thank you for asking me to come.
Thank you so much. So obviously this is a highly topical area at the moment. And actually it wasn't in our build pipeline for our courses, but we decided as the sort of advent of COVID struck and we started to look at the comorbidity data, we realized how important it is to start looking in a more focused way at obesity as a disease. So we typically have associated the low carbohydrate diet with the treatment of, diabetes, hypertension, and some other chronic diseases, but we've never really actually focused specifically on obesity within a clinical setting. So we really wanted your unique perspective in this area, both from a personal and a professional perspective. So can you share with me your journey around treatment of obesity and your understanding of it as a disease?
Yeah, it's become my focus because I've struggled with obesity my entire life, overweight. I was never huge, like never 350 pounds or 400 pounds, but always been a struggle, gaining 5 or 10 pounds a year. And then, you're working out more, and it's frustrating because you're following the standard of care and you're seeing yourself getting worse. I was pre-diabetic 3 years ago. My weight was about 60 pounds heavier than it is now. And so you start looking and saying, gosh, what we're doing is not working. And I saw what Professor Noakes was going through and the stand he took. And I started looking more into the data and trying to understand it for myself. And then I lost 30 pounds right off the bat, and my patients started asking me, and then I was in an ethical dilemma saying, gosh, it's working, but it's not the standard of care. What do I tell my patients? So I can say, well, I can't advise it, but here's what I'm doing, right? And then, now we have tons of data coming out. Now we're seeing the benefits. We're seeing the disaster of poor metabolic health. I'm sure a lot of people have talked about the study with 88% of us being metabolically sick in the U.S. So we're in a major problem, with COVID. Over time, what I did is I was in my standard medical practice for 17 years, and I realized I wasn't being effective because I knew what was killing my patients would be metabolic disease, all of the underpinnings, all of the disasters that come from poor metabolic health for years and years and years. We're good at treating infectious diseases, but now all of a sudden, we're seeing people get more dementia, more Parkinson's, more diabetes complications. And I think, I just gave a talk on physician burnout. If you want to burn out a physician, let all their patients get sicker. We come in to help people, and then you realize your patients are getting worse and worse, and all we can do is throw another drug. And then we throw another drug for the side effect for the first drug, and then we get into this prescription cascade that's a total disaster. So when you look at the data and the reality of who's dying of COVID, it's not the 22-year-old super athlete, right? That's not who's dying of COVID. It's the morbidly obese, or maybe not even obese, really. We focus on obesity, but really comes back to metabolic health because there's thin type 1 diabetics with poorly controlled sugars who are dying of COVID also. So it's not just the obesity problem necessarily, it's the metabolic health. But when we focus on metabolic health, the obesity problem solves itself, it seems.
So you talked about how you didn't study this in med school and it wasn't part of your practice. So what is that? I mean, can you just explain that journey? Obviously, we come from a South African perspective. It's a bit different here. We have the same problems with metabolic health in our country as you do in the States. We're a couple of years behind, perhaps. What is that? How did you step through those hurdles of going against the conventional standard of care?
Well, what happened really, I had a lot of huge influences in my life. Rob Sivas, who's speaking, huge influence. I mean, he's a huge part of why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Ben Bickman, I was in Denver and I happened to have the opportunity to talk to Ben. And I said, Ben, if I want to live a long, healthy life, what do I have to do? He said, oh, Brian, it's easy. First of all, don't work yourself to death. I'm working 14-hour days every day trying to meet the needs of my patients. Get enough sleep. I'm like, sleeping 5 or 6 hours because I got to drive half an hour to get to work, or I'm going to hit traffic if I don't leave by 5 in the morning. So that was 0 for 2 out of 5. I thought, this isn't very good. Then he said, eat real food, low carb, real food. Don't smoke or drink to excess, right? And exercise regularly. That's it. I mean, what am I doing here? And when you look at it, physicians are sick and suffering from depression, anxiety, stress, and all alcohol abuse and all these that we should know better. The suicide rate among physicians just in the US is 300 a year kill themselves. These are our best and our brightest. Why? Because they've given up. They've seen their patients getting worse. And so what I did, I started realizing, look, if I do upfront investment in my patients, they don't get the disasters. Because we've all seen it. Any doctor listening will know. You see people with peripheral vascular disease, peripheral neuropathy, and all we can do is throw pain meds at them and try to minimize the pain. But if we can prevent it, we know we prevented it. If we can, get people off of insulin, diabetes meds, the answer is not to just to flood people with insulin, because that's making the situation worse. They get more insulin resistant, then we give them more insulin. Then they gain 40 pounds, and then we're mad at them, and they're mad at us. So it's one of those things you start realizing, okay, if you have an 8-minute office visit with a patient, it's impossible to educate. It's impossible to know that they're going through a divorce or what their family struggles are or why they're struggling with food. But if we have an hour with them, we can change lives. And I started realizing it. So I switched my practice model at the urging of my partner, Tro, my partner on the podcast, to do direct primary care. Guess what? My investment now is to make people healthy and to keep them healthy. And I kind of joke with my patients, say, look, the longer you stay healthy, the more money I make in the long run, right? Because I'm not pay per visit type doctor. And also the healthier you are, the less I have to see you. So it's better for me too, but it's better for you to be healthy, to have a doctor who's invested in your health. The problem with our system has been that the doctors get paid more from the government. It flows through the insurance companies and the government by having sicker patients. Because if you have diabetes, I get paid more. Why? Because it's going to take more resources and more demands on my time. But really preventing diabetes or reversing it is going to take a lot more time than that. And by doing that, we're saving the system a ton of money. That's why what Professor Noakes has been talking about all these years is so critical. It's critical that we prevent the disease before it happens. In an analogy with cars, I'd rather have a mechanic who changes my oil and keeps my car running than waiting until I blow up my engine and say, oh, I'm the best at changing the engine. And that's what medicine's become, unfortunately.
So talk to me about how you treat your patients and what your process is. I know you've recently started a new practice, which I'm assuming is the way that you think it should be. So let's look at that and how you set it up.
Yeah, I'm in a great practice with a partner, Kristen Bear, who's obesity medicine trained. So we're really focusing on the metabolic health. I hate to even say obesity medicine, right? Or medical weight loss. I'm focused on metabolic health. The weight loss is a side effect, really. It really is. Because when people are metabolically healthier, we're seeing their mood get better, their anxiety, their depression. So our approach really is really starting out trying to take someone who's sugar dependent, drinking 4 sodas a day or 5 sodas or 8 sodas a day and say, okay, can we cut that out? Let's do a stepwise approach. And once we get someone fat adapted, they just do unbelievably well. Because really what we fall into this trap of exercise more and eat less. Professor Noakes fell into the trap. A lot of us have. I fell into the trap. And I'm trying to work out more and, being stressed and not sleeping. And so really, I think taking a step back and looking at the big picture of understanding, okay, what do I have to do to be healthy? Because you can eat a perfect diet and still have metabolic disease. Why? Because you're stressed and tense and hate the world and you're angry every day and, you're not sleeping and worried and, these kind of things. So let's try to hit all those. And we find when we hit it, we do better. So what we can do here is we can have 24-hour monitoring. If you want Big Brother, I can be Big Brother because we have 24-hour glucose testing. Guess what? With Freestyle Libre or another device, I can see what's going on right away. And it's even a better indicator than the scale, because the scale, if you work out really hard, can go up if you retain a little fluid one day. So people get really, really obsessed with the weight and not looking at metabolic health, because what we could do is track insulin levels and watch them cut in half quickly. We could look at measurements. If you're putting 18 pounds of muscle on, I don't care if your weight doesn't change because you're changing your metabolic health. So those are things we could do. We could look at blood pressure cuffs, right? If people lose weight right away, we could follow them and taper off the meds because we could see what their blood pressure is actually doing with decreased insulin levels, right? With decreased stress levels, improved sleep. And the best part about it really is, other than being Big Brother, the 24-hour glucose monitor is extremely helpful for educating the patient, because it's not my opinion anymore. They can look, and just last week, I had 4 patients tell me, guess what? Spiked my sugar the worst. Cereal in the morning, right? And they know, they don't have to take my opinion anymore. They see it. When they have eggs, it goes down their sugars, right? Or if they eat certain foods like low carb keto, they're doing better. And they look and say, well, why should I be shooting insulin? I was shooting insulin with each meal. Now my sugars drop with each meal. It's like, yeah, that's kind of the point when you're fat adapted.
through when you get a patient like this and you get them onto a CGM, which it sounds like that's your first suggestion, if you can set that up and if they can afford it and all of those things. Is that what you first recommend for even somebody that isn't necessarily diabetic, but that has perhaps heightened insulin? Or how do you decide who's going to go onto CGM, and what is your kind of protocol?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because over the last month of doing this kind of medicine, it's really dawned on me that the value of the continuous glucose monitor. There's a movie, Fat Fiction, where they had people do the standard diet and then they have them do the low carb diet. And you see the numbers flatten, you see it. And so for me, it's funny. I have one patient, her husband's type 1, her son's type 1. And she comes in, I said, she's trying to lose weight. And I said, well, I don't think you need a CGM. She said, I need it. I said, why? She said, if you're watching me, I won't eat anything, but I'll go in the closet and eat 2 cookies. But if I know you could see it with the CGM, I'm not going to do it. She said, I need accountability. So that's in her case. And she comes in and she gets it. And so she's looking at her tracings. I had the pleasure just recently of getting 12 of my patients together and going for a walk. We went for a little nature walk. And it was amazing just to hear the sense of community and people saying, oh my gosh, I put this in my coffee and guess what? My sugar spiked. Oh, me too. Guess what? And you hear people talking about what their experience is and what they're learning. 2 of them showed me their tracing. They said, look at my sugars at this point. And the sugar spiked on both of them. What was it? A contentious work meeting when they were stressed and tense, it spiked the sugars. One of them said, look at my sugars when I don't sleep well the next day. So they're telling me, I don't have to tell them, we can look at it. And really the great information it tells us is if you're fat adapted or not. For instance, one of my patients, this is kind of interesting. He came in, he had lost 44 pounds doing a liquid type diet, like Metafast, something along those lines. And I said, what are you doing here? He said, I'll shoot myself if I have to keep doing this. I can't stand it. I'm grumpy at work. I'm always hungry. I'm miserable. He's on 600 calories a day and he's a big guy. So we had a continuous glucose monitor, looked at him. So really the first 2 weeks, looking at his tracings were the opposite of mine. Whenever he exercised, his sugars dropped. Whenever he exercised, his sugars dropped. Not that mine spike when I exercise, if I do kickboxing or something like that. And so I'm like, that's interesting. Then the 3rd week, guess what? His sugar spiked with exercise. What that tells me is that he got fat adapted. Now he's kicking out that stored sugar. Now his body is able to run okay on his stored energies rather than trying to conserve everything. So I think it's very interesting because this is probably why people lose a bunch of weight with a liquid diet and then they gain it all back plus some, because they shut their metabolism down. His insulin level, by the way, after losing 44 pounds was elevated. And on a ketogenic diet, eating 3 times as many calories as he was, his insulin's normalizing, right? So it's kind of cool to see that. And then you realize, oh, okay, here's how it works. It's not about starving yourself. And that's why it's unsustainable.
So talk to us about what markers you look at before you put someone onto a ketogenic diet. Do you do bloods and do you look at different things and look for specific ranges, or do you just automatically go, okay, this is going to support you with weight loss, let's try it?
No, we do. No, I love to look at the markers because I think the markers are an encouragement for people. When you see your insulin dropping, you see your A1C coming down, so really I like to get an insulin level, fasting insulin level, 3-month sugar average, which is the hemoglobin A1C, and a basic lipid panel, metabolic panel. Obviously thyroid we check just to make sure there's nothing else going on because these are people struggling with their weight. And so what we find is a lot of people will, it's very interesting. The data is interesting because there's some people who are morbidly obese and their insulin's not very high because they can keep shoving sugar away into their fat store. So some people have the luxury of getting obese rather than getting diabetes, because you wonder why we would get obese. Why would that happen? It's your body protecting you. It's saying, look, it's better off being stored in the fat stores than in your bloodstream. But once you run out of storage units, then you're in trouble. So I have one of my good friends, as a matter of fact, this weekend, I was watching when he was eating. I said, we should just check your insulin. He's about 150 pounds, all muscle, 6-pack abs. His insulin level is markedly elevated, like 10.9 or something like that. And I'm surprised, right? But he's drinking sodas and because he's not worried about getting fat. So he's eating this stuff for energy. And then now he realizes, oh, that's why my joints are inflamed and my back hurts and all that kind of stuff. Having high insulin, even though his A1C is still normal. So this is something we're looking at. You can't just look at someone who's thin and think they're metabolically healthy.
Absolutely. And triglycerides and lipids, what is your stance on them?
Exactly. Having that is critical. It's fun because we could see these numbers, and I'm actually surprised a lot by what I'm seeing. I'm seeing more people have triglycerides drop like crazy. HDL come up like crazy on a low carb ketogenic diet. So having those markers is really helpful. The triglycerides, I think, are the most sensitive. That's what I see change the most, and insulin levels, fasting insulin levels. But when you see the triglycerides coming down, it is remarkable. Tro just published a paper on this. And I've seen people drop from, triglycerides of 1,500 down to less than 100 in 3 months. So LDL is the wild card. Generally during a state of weight loss, the LDL is going to raise up for the first 3 months in my experience, and then it drops. Not necessarily though. I've seen some people just drop their LDL like crazy on a ketogenic diet. So it's I can't predict what's going to happen with LDL. Triglycerides I can predict. HDL I can predict coming up. Triglycerides, the LDL possibly will come up, possibly go down, but what I see is they stabilize and drop over time. Because in a weight loss phase, for instance, I did an experiment on myself, and my LDL was going up and I was losing weight. So I thought, let me try something. So I went to a pescatarian diet for a month: fish, vegetables, no bacon, no butter, nothing like that. I survived it, but guess what? My LDL went up 40 points during that month. It went up on a fish diet. How's that? I was losing weight, to be fair. If I was gaining weight, probably my LDL would go down. With the energy model with cholesterol, really the highest cholesterol I've seen are in triathletes. Very, very, very fit people who are very lean, and what we call a lean mass hyperresponder. I've seen LDL cholesterol in the 500 range, right? And so, yeah.
So if you have a patient whose LDL goes up dramatically, what do you do and how do you treat them?
Well, I've had experience with this. Really, they're generally the athletes. So one guy consulted me from Northern California that came down, and his LDL cholesterol was 380, and he weighs 136 pounds, and he's all muscle, and he rides his bike 400 miles a week. So I said, well, in his case, I said, well, if you're worried about the numbers, and his coronary calcium was 0, by the way. So I said, if you're worried about the numbers and your doctors are freaking out and everyone's upset, you can liberalize, in his case, liberalize his carbs a little bit, because he's not insulin resistant and he's not going to spike. His insulin is very low. So in his case, I liberalized the carbs a bit and cut back on the exercise a bit, and his numbers normalized. I had another patient that was a doctor from Texas, same thing. Her sugars would spike to 300 when she was doing CrossFit, and it would sustain for a long time. And she weighs 96 pounds and she's all muscle. So she liberalized her carbs and changed her workout from a CrossFit type workout to like a Ben Bakikio 15 minutes to fitness workout. And all of her numbers normalized, right? So it's very interesting. So sometimes it could be the stress of a very intense workout that could spike the sugars or the LDL. You think about it, their body's panicking, trying to find an energy source. For me, it's easy. They'll say, okay, pull some of the fat out of the love handles, stored glycogen in the liver and use it. But if you deplete all that, it's really, your body really panics. It's in a panic mode. So that LDL, even though it's going up, it's not that you're producing a lot of LDL, right? Because we know this from fasting studies that if you fast for 3 days, your LDL will double most of the time. It will go way up. Doesn't mean you're killing yourself. It's just your body's looking for energy, so it's going to pull from your fat stores. So if you're in a weight loss or a weight gain phase, and that's, Dave Feldman has shown that with diabetics, where we say, oh, look, their LDL is fine. It's not fine. It's just because their triglycerides are so high that it's hiding the LDL cholesterol. And when they get healthier, the LDL goes up, and then everyone panics, right? They freak out.
It's obviously, I think obviously aside from the bioindividuality, there's so many nuanced aspects to the journey of weight loss and how to, what we're talking about here is reversing obesity. So what do practitioners need to look out for as danger signs? Obviously you've talked about LDL spiking, but you're trusting that it's going through. Where do you get to that point where you start to go, okay, we need to modify, we need to up the carbs, we need to change things here?
Yeah, for most of us, that's not the issue. Why? Because we're dealing with obese patients. When you have fat stores to pull from, you're not seeing such a dramatic change. It's mostly the lean athletes. And then we have to get them to a good sports nutritionist who understands to say, what kind of carbs do we liberalize with? And you hate to, obviously as low carb people hate to add carbs at all, but if you're treating them, and what I let people know is like, look, we're treating a number, not you as a patient. Because we're treating your doctor, really, because they're freaking out. I get it. It scares me still when I see an LDL go through the roof, right? And it's always in these lean athletes. So, the big thing I tell people, really, it's education. So when I see, for instance, just go back to my own experience. When I first started doing low carb keto, I'm losing weight, everything's going great. And I see my sugars going up in the morning. Every day it's going up. I'm not eating sugar. why is my dang sugar going up? Something's wrong. So I called Jason Fung. I said, Jason, something's wrong, man. Look, my sugars keep going up in the morning. He goes, oh, that's good. You're fat adapted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I see that trend in all of my patients now that are fat adapted. Once they get fat adapted, guess what? Their sugars go higher fasting a lot of times. Mine do. When I work out hard, my sugars go up. If I do a weight-bearing exercise, my sugars stabilize or drop after I'm done working out. Like if I do a Ben Bakikio type workout where you stress the muscles acutely, and that showed me something about metabolic health. The more muscle mass you have, there are independent studies showing this. If you're in the top third of muscle mass, your chance of living to 100 goes up like 40 to 60%. And the chance of getting cancer drops 60 to 80%, right? Because muscle mass means you're more insulin sensitive. So all these things are so critical when we look at it. It's like, okay, what is my metabolism? Really, it's your muscle mass, right? You have to sustain muscle mass. It's very metabolically active tissue. And if you tax your muscles, like some of these athletes are doing, very metabolically active. So you're going to see your metabolism changing.
So you're saying that actually metabolism equals muscle. You could derive it to that point.
Well, I think so. I think that's why, we have a difference of opinion. Tro gets into fights with these muscle guys who say, look, my guys are eating Pop-Tarts all day and they're fine. Well, they are now because they have so much muscle mass that when they're eating the extra carbs, where does it get shuttled to? The muscles, because their muscles are metabolically active. But if you have a person who's watching TV all day or sitting at their desk, and they try to eat the same thing, they can't do that. And that's who Tro and I are seeing most of the time. We're not seeing these world-class, full muscle athletes. So it really is a spectrum, and it depends on how fit that person is, right? How much muscle mass, because the muscle is going to, these type 2B muscle fibers that Ben Bakikio talks about are real. I mean, it really is very metabolically active. And that's why the only time I've had low sugars on a ketogenic diet is combining a glass of low-carb wine with Ben's workout, and it brought my sugars down because my body is metabolizing the alcohol rather than making more sugar for me. So it's pretty interesting when you get into, we can get very nuanced in the discussion, but it's interesting when we can understand why things are going one way or the other. But I think getting back to your question is, the important thing is for the practitioner to understand there's going to be changes, and we have to let the patients know, look, here's what we're going to see, right? My guy right away, I told him, going from a liquid diet of 600 calories to a ketogenic diet of 2,600 calories. The interesting things in the first 2 weeks he was with me, he didn't lose a pound. He didn't lose 1 pound in 2 weeks, but he was taking in 2,000 calories more than he was. And so that's telling me his metabolic rate's coming up. Now he's dropping like crazy because he's putting muscle mass on. He's doing the right stuff. He's watching his stress levels, focusing on what's important, looking at his continuous glucose monitors. So, it's that kind of data that's very helpful, really encourages people and say, look, like him, he said he didn't lose a pound, but his pants are falling off, right? His glasses fall off his face now because he's changing, but he's putting muscle on because he can build muscle now that he's eating more protein, right? He was starving himself before.
So can you talk to us a little bit about the metabolic differences and obesity in men and women and how to treat it?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Women are definitely tougher to treat. There's no doubt about it. It just depends too. If someone comes to me and they tell me on the first visit, I'm drinking 5 sodas a day, they're going to kill it. Just making that change. I've had one of my guys in 6 weeks lost 35 pounds just cutting out soda. That's all he did. Nothing else, no other change. That's all he did. So when you look at it from that standpoint, some people who eat healthy and they're trying different stuff before they come in, it's going to be more of a struggle for them for sure. And they're watching their husband lose a bunch of weight really quickly. And it may have to do with muscle mass and activity levels and hormones. Hormones, I mean, when you stabilize the hormones, it makes a huge difference, right? My wife will tell you, when her period's about to start, she's craving everything. And she's like, why is that? She doesn't even put 2 and 2 together. And then she says, oh, no wonder I was craving chocolate, right? Now, so there's so many things like that once we stabilize it, because, really, when going back, what I really want to do with my patients is, if I see them like on a Wednesday this week, I'd rather have them have the CGM on for 3 or 4 days, eating their normal diet, and then switch over to the ketogenic diet or a low carb diet and see because when they see that, one of my patients did that. I'm like, that was so powerful, because she was spiking with cereal and all these things she thought was healthy. And then she ate eggs and everything was flat. Right. And she's like, oh my gosh, like when you see the change in yourself, then you realize, oh, it does make a difference. Then it doesn't matter my opinion anymore. So I think it's fun for people to see that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So how do you support your patients to self-monitor, take notes, food diary themselves with a CGM on? Do you give them a toolkit, or what recommendations do you give them?
What we do, I love when people will journal. I love that because they'll come in, a month later, say, oh my gosh, my back was hurting every day. Now it doesn't hurt. Now I'm thinking more clearly. And so things I worried about, I don't worry about it anymore. Because, it's really the education part is very important, because what I found clinically, and now it's being substantiated with actual research, is when people are stress eaters, right, and they're less stressed, guess what? They don't binge eat as much, right? Because there's inflammation in the brain. You get the insulin right, you get the triglycerides down. Both Dr. Unwin showed that also, is that high triglycerides increase hunger. So you get into this total nightmare of being stressed, eating terrible, like COVID, being stressed, staying at home, eating childhood cereals that make you feel better or whatever, those kind of things, and drinking soda and drinking more alcohol because you're stressed and you're calming your nerves. And then it starts spiraling out of control. And then the average person is gaining 15 pounds during this COVID, right? They're not working out, they're stressed, they're not sleeping, they're watching this. And so when you see this whole constellation of problems, we say, well, if we fix one of those, if we eat your diet right, guess what? Sleep starts getting better, Let's not focus on the bad news all day long. Why don't you go out for a walk or go do something, get a little sun exposure. Vitamin D deficiency is another huge one for metabolic health and dying of COVID. It's a huge risk factor. It's having low vitamin D levels. So let me get back to your question. Remind me of your question again. I get so excited.
Around how you get your patients to document and track when they've got a CGM on their actual food diary. And that question came from Dr. Wellington, who also is a very big proponent of CGMs, but I think he struggles to get patients to actually document what they've eaten, so he can't see as clearly as he'd like to.
It's great because, with the continuous glucose monitor that I'm using, they can put a little note on there saying, this is when I ate, this is when I didn't sleep well, this is when I ate a certain food, this is when I worked out, and we can look at it and say, oh, look at your response to working out, look at your response to, but most of my patients now are eating low carb. So I'm not seeing the huge spikes. I'm not seeing those things except in times of stress, times of poor sleep, and with exercise, right? That's when I see the sugar spike. So it's helpful to see. As a matter of fact, going back to that, one of my patients, I was noticing her sugars were spiking in the morning, and then coming down and looking pretty good the rest of the day. So I asked her, what are you eating for breakfast? And she said, I'm just having eggs and a piece of bacon and maybe a quarter of an avocado. I'm like, gosh, that shouldn't be spiking your sugars. What time do you eat breakfast? She said, 11:30. And I said, okay. So at 11:30, her sugars dropped after 11:30. Before that, they were running high because guess what? She went for a long walk every morning, right? She goes, I'm exercising every day. So when we see it in context, we say, okay, now it makes sense. That's what your body should be doing because you're fat adapted. So, so some people will keep a food diary. Most of mine don't, as a matter of fact.
So in a case like that, would you suggest her to rather eat before exercise or to change things slightly, or would you just let it run its course?
No, it's the best thing you can do, because what's our goal? If our goal is weight loss, for me, for instance, I'll give you a personal experience, is if I was fasted all day, like I would start my morning 80, 82. By the end of the day, because I have a stressful job back then, it will probably be stable now, 92 or so at the end of the day. And then I would do kickboxing for an hour. At the end, I thought, I better check my sugars are going to be low. And I'd check it, 143 after I worked out. But then I would have dinner, a steak and vegetables or something, it would drop to 70 after that. Because your body is kicking out sugar reserves from where? Where does that sugar come from? I didn't eat it today. It's coming from my fat stores, coming from glycogen in my liver. Fat stores is kicking out gluconeogenesis to keep my body from getting low energy. So then the question became, with my diabetes educators, I give them a bad time because I had two of them go on a CGM and they thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? Because they realized their sugar's normalized. So how much should I have how much should I have carb loaded before that workout when my sugar goes to 143 fasted after exercise? By definition, I was diabetic that day, by the way, because I hadn't eaten and my sugar was 143. But it's all depending on the context. In that context, I'm happy about the sugar spike because it's from my fat stores, and that's the whole point of what we're going after.
Absolutely. Sure. Very, very subtle, interesting balance. So I want to just jump back a little bit to where we were talking about women and metabolic health. So we've had a lot of anecdotes around perimenopause and menopause, and adjustments and problems with a ketogenic diet. Has that been your experience, and what advice do you have for practitioners?
Yeah, you know, I'm of a different school of thought. I think I don't do a huge lab panel and look at hormones and all that when I started. Maybe we will down the road, but enough times we picked up high insulin levels, and when we resolved that issue, the hormones seem to follow suit afterwards. So most of my patients are paying cash for their labs, so out of respect and not wanting to break the bank. And the utility. So if their estrogen is a little higher, a little low, I don't know if it makes a difference in what I'm doing anyways, because I'm still going to recommend exercise, ketogenic diet, normalizing the hormones. And, you know, like Jason Fung's talking about, you know, with polycystic ovary disease, we're seeing women get pregnant or one of my patients came back and said, I'm so mad at you. And I said, why should I didn't have my period for 6 months. Now it came back, right? Because now her body's healthy and it's saying, okay, you're able to procreate, right? So because she's healthier, before she was too sick, they said, you're not going to do well in pregnancy. It's not going to be good, right? So a lot of times these hormone things, I think it really slows the progress down. You know, I think, and plus, you know, it's not just that. And I think it's the people who are expecting that they're going to lose 30 pounds the first week, right? When you have that expectation. So I think part of our job is managing expectations and showing the patients where they're benefiting. I think that's a huge thing, because I can't figure, you know, I have a patient, she came to me, she did the DASH diet for 6 months and lost 6 pounds. She went ketogenic and lost 110 pounds, right? But how in the world does this person come through and just crush it after being obese her entire life? So I think there's more to the story than just hormones. I think one of the things is the more you've starved yourself, the more you know, the average patient, it's the same. What have you tried? I've tried this, and it's the same answer every time. We already know they've tried the liquid diets when they're really desperate. So the more we yo-yo up and down, the worse off we do. And that's why people look at sustainability of ketogenic diet. Is it sustainable? Well, I've seen it sustainable. I've seen people maintain weight loss. I've maintained weight loss for 3 years and, you know, never did it before. It was always up and down yo-yo, right? So I think, you know, there's so much to this. It's not that just, okay, change your diet and everything's great. You know, you know, one of my patients came in, we spent an hour and I said, why do you self-destruct? That was my question to her. Why do you self-destruct? Because she's lost weight and gained it all back, but it's all self-destruction. And she said, I was abused as a kid. No one ever asked me that, right? Then we have a nice conversation, try to fix that problem or try to get in with a counselor. So it's not just, you know, it's not just that you love food. You know, there's true food addiction. There's some people who just get bored and eat more, and they you know, some people, it's their party lifestyle. So it's just really figuring out that one person, and it's individualized to everyone. That's what I've learned is that you can't say, okay, here's the formula, everyone does the same thing. You know, so, you know, some people already understand keto, so I might start at a different place than someone else who's never heard of it before.
So how do you support patients with their mindset and with their kind of actually sticking it out? Because that seems to be one of the biggest challenges, is adherence and keeping going.
Yeah, I'm cheating the system now. I tell my patients I'm cheating the system. We are cheating the system. Why? They're seeking me out because when someone else is paying the bill, you have no skin in the game, right? I have patients now that come to me. One of my guys, as an example, say it costs $100 a month to come see me. We have him on a continuous glucose monitor, and he just stopped a medicine called Januvia. His copay was $325 a month. It was, oh my gosh, this is like the best thing ever. I feel great. My joints don't hurt, and I'm saving money now by seeing you, right? So you realize, okay, in my old practice, 80%, I had to come to this conclusion, and this is why I was getting burned out, and this is why I'm talking about it. 80% of my patients didn't care what I had to say. I could tell them, look, here's the way out. Yeah, I see you going towards the cliff. Here's the way out. And then they didn't care. So I took time away from my wife, my kids, my family, trying to help people that didn't really want help. They said, just throw insulin on. I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't need me. Go to any doctor will give you insulin. Anyone can do that, right? Yeah. So reversing the disease process, now it's fun because I have people coming in every day and they're feeling great and their energy is better and their focus is better and their marriage is better and they're not stressed out as much. And, you know, seeing that makes my job fun. I laugh and I'm like, I'm getting paid for this. Like I'm helping people and they're coming in happy rather than saying, oh gosh, I have this pain and this pain. Medicine, I mean, just circling back around, it's like this. Us doctors are really good at giving medicines. We're really good at that. So if someone comes in sunburned all the time, I say, oh, let's try this medicine. Let's try a different medicine. But at some point you'd say, stop going in the sun so much. You're sunburned. And that's the problem, right? I can give you a medicine to make you feel better, but it's not fixing the underlying problem, you being in the sun consistently every single day. So it's those kind of things we have to step back and say, okay, what am I treating? You know, Ben Bickman's book, Why We Get Sick, is outstanding because he says, look, Parkinson's disease, dementia, polycystic ovary disease, diabetes, obesity, all the fatty liver disease. We're looking for a pharmaceutical intervention to treat it. Guess what? Rob Sivas treats it in 3 days. 2 days of ketogenic diet, 1 day of fasting. He decreases cardiac mortality and infection rate and all these things. So until we get that, it's going to be a problem for our system. We really have to figure out the underlying root causes, Ivor Cummins would say, of these disease processes and hit those rather than hitting the symptoms. Because if you come to me with a fever and I keep giving you Tylenol, I can lower your fever down, but I'm not treating the underlying pneumonia that you have. I got to treat that.
So obviously this is, it's like preaching to the converted, giving this lecture on the Nutrition Network training. But the big question is, how do we get to the other 1 million or more physicians in America and the rest of the world that haven't got it and that are still training in the old model and prescribing insulin?
Yeah, it's going to be a big problem. Personally, I think see the way out of doing what I'm doing. What we need is more smaller clinics. Come to my clinic, there's no waiting room, right? We have a couch and a chair because I bring you right back. I see you and I'll spend time with you. I'm in no hurry. You can't show up 15 minutes late. No biggie, right? That's just your time. In my old practice, if you had a 15-minute appointment, you show up 15 minutes late, my whole day is ruined, right? I'm not going to see my wife for dinner. So I'm upset with you. And, so you start understanding we can't do mass treatment of the average doctor has 2,000 patients. I had 2,200 patients before. Now I have 200 patients. Do you think I can't be a better doctor doing this? I could spend more time with each patient. So the problem is we either have to reach people by technology like this. I could do a Zoom meeting. I could give one talk and reach a lot more people than I can in this exam room right here, right? So you start realizing, how can I be most effective? How can we be most effective is by having, we have a shortage of doctors, but is it a shortage of doctors or an oversupply of sick people, right? So if we do the upfront work, and I think more insurance companies and more healthcare systems are going to start looking at this, because I could tell you CFO or COO, whatever, running the healthcare plans, I know where your money's going. It's going to diabetes complications, cardiovascular disease, heart attack, stroke, stents, bypass surgery. Number one cause of dialysis is diabetes. Number one cause of amputation, diabetes. Number one cause, all these things, blindness, diabetes, peripheral vascular disease, peripheral neuropathy. So you say, okay, we got a problem. How do we address this? It's going to be lifestyle. Ultimately, it's going to be lifestyle, because all the pills are not going to reverse the underlying too much sugar coming in the system. You can hide it for a while, but you got to fix the problem. So I think that the advice for practitioners out there is like, look, understand what you're doing and the impacts you're going to have. The thing is, young doctors are not going to know that disasters maybe that they've prevented. So I think knowing you're preventing a disaster from coming for that patient, it's not just about the money, it's about suffering. The suffering patients go through. It's like, I had one patient who's like, I never want to experience anything like that again. He came to me, he was already on hospice, had a gangrene in his foot, disaster. And we got him actually doing better. But ultimately, guess what happened? He shot himself in the head because he was going blind and he couldn't accept going blind. Why is he going blind? Because for 30 years, his doctor said, here, just take more insulin and you can eat whatever you want. And I come along and say, no, it's not the way it is. It's not the truth. They just want to make you feel better about yourself. But once the damage was done, it was irreversible. There's nothing you can do. So those kind of things, that's not fun for anyone. What's fun is people coming in and saying, oh, doc, guess what? My blood pressure's low. Can I stop my blood pressure medicine? Yeah, let's do it today. Right, great.
So how do you work with specialist colleagues like cardiologists or other specialists who are not yet supportive or LCHF educated?
Well, all I can do is try to educate. That's all I can do is say, look, here's my clinical experience. And it happens all the time. And I just laugh to myself because it ultimately doesn't matter to me, because it's, people respect me. I've had a great relationship with all these doctors over the years. So they know my integrity. They know me. So it's funny because they'll say, one of my good friends is a cardiologist. And we just look at it from a different perspective. I show them studies that show the higher your insulin level is, the more likely, Dr. Kraft and in Colombia, they did a huge study. And the biggest indicator of a future heart attack was high insulin levels. So I was like, you guys focus on LDL. Look, LDL made no difference. There was no difference in the Colombia study from people who had a heart attack and didn't, from an LDL total cholesterol standpoint. But guess what? Insulin, 700% increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So if you have a guy with 5 stents in his heart, and they say, well, you're telling him to eat more fat. I'm like, I'm telling him to lower his insulin level is 58. As a matter of fact, just recently I had a young patient who's a tech guy, came down he drove for 2 hours to see me. And And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. I'm just saying it's sad that he had to drive 2 hours to see someone who can help him. He's Indian descent, had a massive heart attack, was on a balloon pump with an ejection fraction of 25%, which is horrible. 47 years old, 47 years old. So I was like, let me look at your numbers. And he goes, look, my cholesterol, they can't figure out my cholesterol is normal. I said, what's your A1C and insulin? He goes, I don't know. Guess what? Insulin level, markedly elevated. A1C, 6.4. 6.5 is diabetes. No one looked at it. Why? Because he looked thin. No one thought about it. They never crossed their brain that maybe this is an insulin problem. Dr. Avadia, he's a cardiothoracic surgeon. Guess what he is? Carnivore. And I said, how the heck can you be carnivore and a cardiothoracic surgeon? He said, I've looked at the patients on my table. And guess what? All of them had elevated insulin, elevated sugars, all of them. He goes, guess what? I'm not elevating those things. He goes, I don't see people like, you know what I'm saying? When you start looking at it from that perspective, you say, okay, there are more and more. You know, I have Brett Scher that was in town here, you know, practicing. So, you know, there are a lot of docs who are starting to get it, and slowly they're filtering in, you know, the orthopedic surgeons. Their dilemma, go ahead.
So no, you go first.
The dilemma for orthopedic surgeons right now, like Dr. Fetke, is people are morbidly obese and their sugars are out of control. If they do surgery on that patient, they're going to kill them. They're going to get an infection, they're going to die on the table. So send them to me for 6 weeks. Let me see what I can do. Doctors like us, right? We can all do it. And I think the big thing is we have to support and help other doctors go into this area, because the more of us there are, trust me, if 88% of us are metabolically sick, there's plenty of business to go around. We're not competition to each other, really. But what we do is we give each other credibility when we start seeing benefits and we start turning lives around. Say, look, here's my evidence, show me yours, like Dr. Unwin had to do, you know? And so I respect all these docs who stepped up, and every single one of them has been helpful to me in my practice, of teaching me and educating and coming on the podcast, because they want to help people. Ultimately, we became doctors to help people. And I think when you get to that point where it's just about, you're pushing a pen and you're writing more scripts and you're throwing people out the door as fast as you can, and you start to resent patients. That's when I said, I can't practice this medicine. I'll take a pay cut, but I'm going to do something I love doing. And every day I come here, I'm happy. It's a beautiful place, but really I'm invested in my patients because they want that investment. They're ready to go, doctor, help me. And I'm ready to go. I love to hear that. Let's do it. Right. We can really change the world doing that, but we have to have patients who are invested and doctors who are invested. But an overworked doctor working 14 hours a day does not have time to research ketogenic diet and low carb and how it can help people. They don't have time because they want to go see their family too. I know how it is.
Find the time. Can you talk to us about your own journey, which I think was very personal, that led you on this path?
I had to. For me, I had to. I'm looking at myself going, okay, especially after talking to Ben, you know, and I said, I'm sleeping hardly. I'm not sleeping. I'm stressed all the time, rushing. And here's my biggest stress in life. This seriously for 17 years was this. I have someone comes in, I can help them. I know I can help them. And they just need to get on the right path. Going to the diabetes educator, I've never seen anyone come off insulin go into a diabetes educator, not one time. So I have to look at my clinical experience and say, how many people in my first 6 months of low carb, 11 people come off insulin. I saw 0 come off in 14 years before that. Yeah. So you start thinking, holy cow, if I can do this myself, and I don't have support. I don't have a nutritionist. Fortunately, now I have an exercise sports nutrition person who understands it. And there's more and more people who understand it. But my biggest stress was this: doctor, there's 3 people waiting, and I'm trying to help this person. Yeah. I can't, because I got 3 people waiting. It's like, I can't teach you all this. But so I figured out how to tailor this down and educate people in a short amount of time. But ultimately, what I realized, the big thing I realized was our podcast had, 2 million downloads, right? So people I meet at conferences would come to me and thank me and say, thank you, you saved my life. I was like, I've never met you before. Oh, this episode with Rob Seibus totally changed my views on stuff. This episode with the professor, the episode, whoever. So you realize, wow, how many people, if I work really, really hard, I can see 25 people a day in my exam room. How many can we reach doing this? A lot more, right? So I think it's not about preaching to the choir. I think what we have to do is support each other and say, okay, and I think the big thing is being open-minded enough to say, okay, maybe I'm going to change my views. Maybe fasting insulin isn't the best thing to check. Maybe there's another thing. But being able to help each other say, look, Brian, here's what I'm doing. Oh, let me try and see if it works. So I think, like Professor Noakes, I have a ton of respect for someone who could have faded off into the sunset. He could have been, always respected, and now you have all these people picking on him because he's doing the right thing. So I think it's having the fortitude to be able to. And you asked me that question of, I tease the specialist now, and I say, look, I'm going to accept your apology, and I'm not going to gloat, and I'm not going to make a big deal because I'm right. I'm right, and I know it. I'm looking at my clinical data. Look at your data. I'll show you mine. And so it's not about being arrogant. It's just saying, look, guys, we got to change our paradigm. And so people like the prof, like Gary Fetke, and all these people who changed their paradigm and are helping people, I respect that. And I see that. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. And it takes a lot of, and I'm not an obstructionist. I'm not one who I'm not like Tro like enjoys the fight. It's like, hey, I'm more like Dr. Unwin. Let me show you my data. And if you don't like it, okay, do what you're doing. Your patients are going to suffer as a result. But I think if we can help people, that's what we're called to do.
So I had a question. I don't know how we are doing for time. We've got a couple more minutes. I had a question around, are you right until 5:30? Is that okay for you?
Oh yeah, I'm fine. If you don't mind my cleaning people coming in and cleaning, I'm here way before them.
So difficult with COVID to get it perfect. So I had a question around the carnivore diet. Obviously, it's quite a contentious area. I'm an ex-veg, 17-year vegetarian, so it's still a challenge for me to get my head around. But we're seeing such incredible results. What is your stance on the carnivore diet for obesity in particular?
I think it's one of the most, for obesity itself, I think it's one of the most powerful tools, because the problem we run into in the ketogenic diet is this. For me, the first visit, I can get a sense of who's going to have success or not to some degree, because some people say, oh gosh, I just don't want to give up this. I love cookies so much, and I love bread, and oh my gosh, I can't imagine that person's going to struggle because they're always thinking about what they can't have rather than what they can. And so sometimes what happens is we say, okay, I'm addicted to brownies. So they say, I'll just make keto brownies, but they're eating keto brownies constantly and they're not showing benefits. So people go carnivore, what it does is takes that out of the equation. And I think there's more to it. I don't know what it is, but the biggest correlation I've seen with carnivore diet, if you look on Sean Baker's website, you listen to Brett Lloyd is another one, massive depression his entire life, goes carnivore, depression gone. And he's happy and singing and doing stuff again. So it has something to do with chemically in the brain. Maybe it's a nutritional thing. I don't know what it is, but I'm seeing it clinically where people go carnivore and they'll lose a significant amount of weight. There's a type 1 diabetic, Andrew Berger, he's on hardly any insulin, from over 200 units of insulin to like 5 now. Carnivore, and his mood's better, his energy, and you look at him, he's a specimen. So it's a hard paradigm to change. But I think when people say I'm not having any sweets at all, it takes out the equation. Instead of saying, okay, I'm just going to have a keto cookie, and then they go, oh, maybe there's one real cookie. And then I think that when people are addicted to sugar, I think those are the people who are really going to benefit. Some people it's not really going to be, the food is not really an addiction for them, it's just kind of habit. So it just depends on the person, but I've seen people go carnivore and absolutely do astoundingly well. And when Sean Baker came out, I laughed. I said, "This guy's nuts." Don't tell him I said that, please, because he's a lot bigger and stronger than me. But I thought he's nuts. And then I saw his coronary calcium 0. I said, "Well, am I going to argue with the guy? It's 0 coronary calcium. If his coronary calcium came markedly elevated, I'd be the first person to say, don't do it. It's bad." But maybe he's an outlier. I don't know. We have to look at data. That's why there's data, research going on looking at it. Because the other thing I didn't mention is I like to get a coronary calcium score as a baseline too, because I can in appropriate patients, because then I can look and see, is my intervention causing a problem or is it helping a problem? I don't know. We don't know the data yet, but if it's true what we're seeing, if what Dr. Obedi, the heart surgeon, is saying, and also what Dr. Kraft and a lot of the doctors are saying, it's like by dropping the insulin and sugar levels, I should be benefiting that patient down the road.
So how do you treat a high-risk patient if they have a high CAC, for example?
Yeah, that's really patient education. Really what I'll do is I have a patient who actually came in, had a higher CAC than I thought he would, high cholesterol levels with weight loss, during weight loss. And so maybe that cholesterol level is going to normalize. Maybe it's not. I have to consent my patient and talk to them and say, look, here's the risks and benefits. So what I do is I pull down the chart. This actually just happened last week. I said, look, in 10 years, here's what Mayo Clinic says. Based on your numbers, if we do nothing at all, your chance of having a heart attack in the next 10 years, and he's a relatively young guy, is 3 out of 100. If I put you on a statin drug every day for the next 10 years, your chance of dying is 2 out of 100. So 1 out of 100. I don't know if they're that one person or not. That's the problem, right? So there's a standard of care, and this is where it gets dicey, because in my opinion now, I would say when we talk about malpractice, I would say if you have a patient who's diabetic and you put them on a statin drug, guess what's going to happen? It's going to raise their triglycerides are going to go up, and their insulin and their sugars are going to go up. So I think it's malpractice to put someone on a statin drug and not put them on a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet at the same time, because you're causing a new problem that we know is a problem. If my chance of dying of a heart attack goes up 700% with having elevated insulin, and I'm raising your insulin, I'm giving you a drug to prevent a heart attack, and I'm increasing your risk of heart attack at the same time. So the way I look at it is like, hey, lifestyle still fits in, because guess what? If you're stressed all day, it's going to raise. I mean, this simple thing that we talk about, when we talk about the Mediterranean diet, it's not just the diet. They wake up and their stress levels lower. They don't worry about COVID or global warming or whatever. They just go out and say, I got to take care of my land. Might go fishing. My neighbor needs help. I'm going to go help them. They have a sense of community. This is what we have to replicate here. You know, it's not just about what you're eating. You can do a perfect ketogenic diet and smoke 4 packs a day. You think you're going to live any longer? You're not. Maybe you'll live a little bit longer than you would if you weren't keto. But, you know, you have to look at the whole picture and the whole organism. It's not just one thing that we can take out. Because again, when people are under massive amounts of stress all the time, what are they going to do? Stress eat, or they're going to drink, or they're going to do stuff to alleviate that stress. And so we have to help with that, you know, and give them some reassurance and help and say, okay, you're doing great. Let's, you know, and I think the other thing you asked about the mental state is so many people. One of my patients came in, you know, she's 85 years old this week. And she's lost 17 pounds. And she came in one day and said, oh, doctor. I said, what, how's it going? She goes, oh, I played bingo last night and I won. And then they gave me a little baby Ruth and I had it, a little candy bar. And I said, did you enjoy it? She goes, hell yeah, I did. And I said, okay, if you enjoyed it, good. Are you back on track? Yep. Okay. No damage. No big deal. Don't worry about it. But guess what? The next week she came in and she had 2 candy bars. Here you go, doctor. I said, what's this for? She goes, you can dispose of them. I won at bingo again, but I didn't eat them. I don't need it. And I threw 6 cookies away that I had hidden for an emergency. Right. Amazing. So I could have said, you idiot, you ate a candy, you ruined everything, you know, because I think that's what happens. We get too militant in our views, and people aren't perfect, and there's going to be the wedding. There's going to be stuff. So we have to be able to understand, like, okay, you're going to have a little setback, but okay. And what I find really is people like say, okay, I'm taking my birthday off. I'm doing what I want. And then they eat all the terrible food and they feel terrible for 3 days. They go, why did I do that? That was dumb. And then they've taught themselves, right? They've taught themselves. So but it depends on the individual. Rob Seibel says, if I have 1 cookie, I'll eat cookies for 6 months and I can't stop. I'm addicted like an alcoholic would be. So I think understanding that patient's mindset, because we don't want to be radical in our views and make it so difficult. People say the bar's too high, I can never give up bread. But I said, how about if you give up the everyday bread, but if you go to a nice restaurant, have a piece of bread, because you only do that every once in a while. It's not going to cause too much damage. And then over time, they don't need that anymore, right? People say, I'm never going to fast. 3 weeks in, they're fasting. So it's funny because when the metabolic, when we see that metabolic change, it really, really changes the brain. It changes what gives you joy and happiness and peace, that kind of stuff. And I think that's really ultimately critical, is finding your peace, finding what you enjoy, laughing more, having fun. I'm doing that more in my new practice than I did in 17 years of my old one. I'm having coffee with except for today, you ruined it, but I'm having coffee with my wife every morning, right? Before I come in, and we could talk about life and the kids and what's happening. Before I'm leaving at 4:30, that's not happening, right? And at night when my kids want to talk, I'm too tired, right? Now I can sleep an extra 2 hours if I want, because I live 3 minutes from my office. So I think making changes like that, where things get painful enough, you make changes. And I think when people get obese enough or their sugars are out of control, that's when they're ready. Unfortunately, we have to wait. And that's another travesty, is doctors wait till you get the diagnosis of diabetes, and then they want to do something. For me, and for our data and what we know, for the last 3 years before changing over here, I had 0 patients get diabetes that I didn't warn them at least 6 months in advance they were going to get diabetes. 0, not one. Why? Because I saw their insulin creeping up and creeping up and creeping up. I said, you're getting more insulin resistant. It's coming. And then it happens. And then they're in the ICU with diabetic ketoacidosis. We could have prevented it if the patient said, okay, I'm invested, I'm scared, I don't want to do it. But once you get the diagnosis, then it's like, okay, tell me, if someone has a heart attack, it's your best patient. Because then they come in and they're like, what do I do? I don't want to go through that again, because it's scary. They realize they're not invincible. So we have to realize we're not invincible before we have the disasters, and we can prevent those.
Absolutely. So anything that we haven't covered that you really want to talk about or mention, particularly with relating to obesity and its treatments, obviously, or to do with your practice that you want to talk about a little bit?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, look, have people take one step at a time, Those are the people who do well, just say, okay, let me walk you through that. Be supportive. I think there's no place in, shaming people and being mean to them. And, I've had people say, look, you're a nice guy, but I don't think I can help you because you're not really ready to give up alcohol. You're not really ready to give up. You have bad social support. I mean, the biggest indicator of failure on a low carb diet or any diet, anything you do in life, is stress and lack of support. So guess what I have to do as a clinician? And my advice to clinicians out there is build a community. You know, I'm very fortunate where I'm at, where I you know, once COVID's over, I'll be able to have a lecture here and bring a bunch of patients in and let them get to know each other and support each other. You know, doing Fat Fiction, that movie, all those patients really loved each other. Like they got to know each other and they support each other and they're so proud of each other and they've accomplished great things, but they're proud of the other person who did. They go, it was harder for them than me. And so having that sense of community is really, really critical. That's why this community is so great. The fact that people are listening, that I'm excited that you have doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals listening and say, okay, let me reassess. Because I tell my patients, look, to me, I don't make any more money if you eat a vegan diet or you eat a keto diet. I'm not investing in any keto companies. I'm not investing in anything. So I'm just trying to help you. You know, our podcast, we take zero funding from any industry. We self-fund that, right? And our Patreon support us now. Because I don't want to be biased and say, oh yeah, only this protein powder works because I'm getting paid by those guys. If I like it, I'll tell you I like it. If I don't like it, I'll tell you I don't like it, right? So I think when we have credibility and they know that we're just trying to do the best we can. And if something comes out next month, I'm not married to my philosophy today. At some point you say, okay, but right now it's working fantastic. And we'll have numbers and we're going to see, you know, people doing better than anything else out there. What we're doing as a community. And then the more it's out there, people start understanding, oh, I get it. When you have specialists that reinforce the same message that you're giving, it's very helpful. But guess what? The problem is we have a shortage of doctors who are doing this because they're specialists who are great specialists, but they're, you know, 4 states from me. And so I can't use them as a referral source. So once I have a specialist who gets it, you know, once we get the cardiologist and doing what you're doing, reaching out and say, oh, I'm keto and I'm here in Los Angeles or I'm in, you know, Orange County, like we can share patients. Okay, great. Now we have a unified message saying you're not killing yourself. Because the worst thing that can happen, and what I do is tell my patients, you know, a lot of patients, I'm not their primary, I'm just doing metabolic health with them. Yeah. And so they go back to their doctor. I go, well, have your doctor call me and we'll talk. And I think I can spend 15 or 20 minutes with that doctor and change their views. And I have to realize they have 2,000 patients they're taking care of. And then, you know, you look at that, you know, for instance, when I talked about physician suicide, 300 doctors in America kill themselves a year because they've just lost hope and everything. Each of those has 2,000 patients on average. So you see 600,000 people are affected by that, by just 300 doctors dying. So if we could make 300 doctors into the fold, how many people can we help just there? How much can you save the system? If all my guys in San Diego got it and we can hammer this out, how much money will we save the insurance companies? We all get a pay cut. I mean, we all get a pay raise, but we get a cut in our premiums, right? Because people are healthier. So until we figure that out, that's the problem. The insurance companies don't want to do the upfront investment. Why? Because the average person changes insurance throughout their lifetime. So they say, why should we invest all this money up front when we're not going to see the benefits of preventing it? Well, there's something to do with like helping people live longer and better lives. You know, I think that's what we have to really look at. It's not all about the money, but unfortunately, the money is what's going to convince them over time.
So, yeah. Brian, when I look at you and when I hear your story, I feel so much hope for the future of medicine. And I guess it's like, what can you offer as advice for that doctor that's still sitting in seeing 100 patients or more a day and is not seeing the results? What can they do?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm a faith and hope guy, right? The other day on Twitter, I made the joke because I said something about faith and I got lit up for 3 days. That people didn't like. I said the word F word. I go, Tro says the real F word and no one says a word. I say that F word and I get in trouble. But hope, yeah, hope, the power of hope. Dr. Unwin talks about that, you know, having the power of hope. And that's one thing that I love because in my patients, I look in their eyes and I see hope for the first time because I go, look, I've tried everything. They're beaten down. It's the learned helplessness that you're like, I tried everything, nothing worked. You go, let's give this a shot. And then I got 2 calls over the weekend from, you know, emails from patients saying, hey, my sugar's normalized over the weekend already. And there's hope now because they thought they would just be on insulin because mom died of heart attacks. And they think it's just inevitable that once you get diabetes, it's a death sentence. It's not. That's the hope, is that you can give hope. You know, as a practitioner doing this, you will see, you'll go home at night. And like now I go home, my wife asked me how my day was. And I go, oh my gosh, I got 10 stories. And that was one thing. As a doc, I do volunteer work, you know, and go to Guatemala and I'd be in the jungle for 14 hours a day and work my tail off and be exhausted. My wife said, you come back from that and all you do is talk about how great it was and how much joy you had. And you made no money and you lost money because you had to pay money to go there, but you've touched lives and you're not married to the computer and you're not married to, you know, prior authorizations. And, you know, it's very clear why doctors are frustrated and upset. So I think when you do stuff you enjoy and you help people, then seriously, I sit at work now and I laugh. I go, I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. And I hear Kristen Bear next door laughing with her patients and having fun. It's not about like, you know, it's a totally different, we're healthcare now. We're not sick care management anymore. We're saying, okay, look, there's a way out. So I think when you have that hope, I think the big thing really of all things is hope. Hell or suicide is the absolute lack of hope. When doctors kill themselves, it's because they have no hope that things will get better. When anyone kills themselves, it's because you lack hope. So for us, the biggest thing we do is have hope. And guess what gives hope? Seeing testimonies of patients who are doing better, of people who've come off diabetes meds. And, you know, going for those walks, having someone who's been doing it for 2 months and someone who's just starting and they can say, oh, look, that's how I felt when I started. That's normal. To have someone who's going through stuff and know you're not the only one. Plus, if you get 12 people who are struggling with their weight, you don't want to be the only obese person at the gym. You don't want to be the only one, but when everyone else is, it's like no one cared. It was just fun. We were just people. So I think when you get out and you say, let's build this community, guys, and we'll help people. And some people who've lost 80, I mean, I look at some people like, what are you doing here? They go, well, I lost 80 pounds doing keto and I'm going to continue. So, and there's other people who are starting their journey. So you can't tell by looking at someone where they are in the journey, right? I'm not Sean Baker. I'm never going to be Sean Baker and I have to be in terms with that. But all I can do is make my body the best it can and my brain the best it can. And so I think that hope is, I think that is what we're doing. I think that is the big word, like you brought it up. And it really is instilling hope in someone is so rewarding because you see their eyes change. When you see someone get it, you know, after a while and they get it and think, wow. And I have patients that I gave up on really because I thought I can't help them. They follow me over here and they get it now and they're killing it. So it's like, when do you give up? I don't know. You have to hold on to hope and hope that the person, you know, if they value what you do, then they're coming back. If you don't do a good job, they're not sticking with you. So, you know, we have to provide customer care and service and be there when they need us. And that's a different type of medicine because really standard medicine right now, the patient is an inconvenience because you have to see, there's so many. It's like, if you have, you know, it's overwhelming the system. When you're overwhelmed, you just see them as like, oh no, they're calling to bug me again. But now it's like, hey, come on in today. I get an opening at 2, come on in. They're like, what, today? I could just come in and say, yeah, I got an opening for you. It's good. You know, I'm going to be here anyways. Might as well see you. Might as well talk to you on the phone. I don't care if you come in, you want to do a video chat. So when you can provide that kind of care, I think that's my advice to docs. Look, first of all, seek professional help if you're having depression, anxiety, stress, and you're miserable, right? And because it's not just your work, you got marriage, you got relationship, you got friendships. And, you know, there's a lot of people that I neglected over the years because I didn't have time for them. I didn't have time to go see my friend in Orange County for 3 years or 4 years, you know? And so anyways, when you make time and prioritize those things, you're going to do better. And I think doing this kind of program where you can help people, you'll go home at night and say, wow, I made a difference today. This is cool, right? No one goes home and says, oh yeah, I prescribed 5 more medicines today. That was so awesome, right? When go home and say, I stopped 5 medicines. Now that's cool, right? So I think that's the thing is we've gotten into that culture of just managing the storm and waiting for that person to decline. And when you see people like, you know, my 85-year-old losing 17 pounds, that's like awesome, right? And her knees don't hurt as bad. And she goes, oh my gosh, I'm not taking ibuprofen anymore. Okay, cool, right, cool. Because there's side effects of that. So anyways, it's that. I think I'm very happy that you're doing this, that you're having more people interested in listening. And my advice is listen to people like Rob Seibus. There's so much wisdom. I've picked up stuff. Listen to our podcast. You know, we have a lot of great people on there. And so when you educate and learn, then you say, oh my gosh. Just last night, just as an aside, my daughter said, Dad, guess what? My friend, she's lost 18 pounds. I go, what's she doing? Keto. Well, really? How'd she know about it? She listens to your podcast. It's like, you're kidding me. I didn't know that. And so those kind of things, when you realize we get the information out in our clinical experience, we're going to be helping a lot of people.
So Brian, thank you so much for your insightful words and for just for sharing through who you are and through your eyes and through your story, the hope that there is in medicine and that you're bringing to this community. It's so important, and we really see it and feel it through you and through your new practice. It's so exciting. Thank you.
No, no, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm excited about the work you're doing because it's critical. You ask how we're going to reach people. It's through you. It's through people like you and Doug Reynolds at Low Carb USA, people that say, look, I'm going to put it on the line and I'm going to get the education out. So, you know, I'm just honored to be a part of it. And I am having fun. It's just, it is that total. I'm a totally different person than I was a month and a half ago, really, because I was beaten down. I was thinking, gosh darn it, every day it's like being on a treadmill that's too fast. You can't catch up. And I have 30 calls to make tonight and I got to deal with the insurance companies. And now I don't deal with those guys anymore. And I'm so much happier. And so that's what I'm hoping a lot. I think that the perfect marriage is going to be a direct primary care model, taking the insurance out of it, cash pay, getting labs done for a tenth of the price of, you know, it's just ridiculous. It's a crazy